On this edition of Freedom Journal Iraq, we'll talk with the oldest jump master in the Army and a new addition to the Iraqi Navy's largest port. These stories and more on today's FJI. Hello, I'm Airman First Class Priscilla Christensen. Welcome to this edition of Freedom Journal Iraq. U.S. and Iraqi Army soldiers have made serious headway in one of Baghdad's most dangerous neighborhoods. Soldiers with Company B, 1st Battalion, 502nd Infantry Regiment set out on a foot patrol through the streets of Shulla to locate and detain known criminals responsible for attacks against Iraqi security and coalition forces. Shulla is different from other areas in Baghdad. It was once practically unknown to coalition forces and very dangerous to anyone who entered the area. However, for the last few months, it has been under control of Iraqi Army and multinational division Baghdad soldiers. Prior to the flare-up in fighting from March to June, the fighting in Shulla was almost non-existent, mainly due to the lack of coalition presence in the area, which allowed enemy forces to roam freely throughout the area. U.S. soldiers and their Iraqi Army counterparts have established a joint security station in Shulla, making it more difficult for criminals to operate and store their weapons in the area. Iraqi security and coalition forces provide security in Shulla not only to enhance the legitimacy of the local government, but also to discredit militants and other enemy forces. This mission gives locals a chance at a better life and shows them that there is light at the end of the tunnel. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is building a new pier to make room for the growing Iraqi Navy in southern Iraq. Petty Officer Patrick Dilley visited the area and shows us another way U.S. forces are setting up the Iraqi Navy for success.
Small groups of the roughly 900-man Iraqi Marine Force are learning about maritime law enforcement fundamentals from U.S. Coast Guard trainers.
River ops.
They'll have new ships and infrastructure in the coming year installed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
We're trying to do more sustainable training, find out good ways to set up training programs to hand over to the Iraqis so they can do it once we leave.
The techniques they refine in the makeshift ship-in-a-box will help them in their mission to secure Iraq's 2 oil platforms.
And we know how to use right use of force. We know how to look for things and how to know what things are legal, what things aren't.
Those skills are reinforced by the Iraqi Marine team leaders.
To get them to learn how to do a safe, compliant boarding and then deal with escalations of force should they occur out there on the river in the Nag.
The Iraqi head of Navy plans to add 500 additional Marines to the force by the end of the year. Petty Officer Patrick Dilley, Basra, Iraq.
Coming up, airborne troops deployed to Iraq come together to celebrate their brotherhood.
Here's your raid report. U.S. soldiers conducted a targeted operation in the Rashid district of Baghdad. They detained 3 suspected criminals during the operation. Iraqi Army and Coalition Forces soldiers conducted an air assault mission in Asawi village. During the mission, they detained 2 suspected IED traffickers. In Mosul, Coalition Forces soldiers detained 2 suspected terrorists. The wanted men were allegedly associated with several Al-Qaeda leaders. Coalition forces near Kirkuk captured a man who allegedly leads the Al-Qaeda in Iraq propaganda network in the area. Intelligence reports indicate he was trying to link propaganda networks from various parts of the country and consolidate operations. And that's your raid report. I'm Senior Airman Michael Williams.
The world-renowned U.S. Airborne Corps is a vital unit in the Army's arsenal. In the 1930s, there was a growing need for a combat paratroop unit. At Camp Victory, paratroopers deployed to Iraq came together to celebrate the airborne heritage. Air Force Sergeant Braden Smith begins with our special look at the Airborne Day celebrations.
68 years ago, the U.S. Army Parachute Test Platoon pioneered a new warfare. Today, it's one of the most elite forces in the Army.
The 82nd Airborne has a proud history.
And just like today, our very first paratroopers were all volunteers. They were all physically fit. They were all hungry for a challenge. With the global threat posed by Nazi Germany, it was clear that we needed to develop an airborne dimension to our warfighting capability. And it was a relatively new concept that other countries were experimenting with. In July of 1940, the U.S. Airborne Test Platoon was created.
And here at the Al-Fall Palace in Camp Victory, service members from all over came to celebrate the birth of a crucial piece of modern warfare.
We can never forget who we are or the values that we cherish. You know, we can win any gunfight, but in order to win in Iraq, we have to maintain our reputation as honorable and respectable soldiers and paratroopers.
At an event attended by some high-profile guests, it was the 82nd Airborne's own chorus from Fort Bragg that stole the show, as they symbolize their preparation for a jump. For paratroopers, the love of jumping out of airplanes exceeds rank.
4-star and a PFC, just and both paratroopers. Nobody cares. It's all about being a paratrooper, about willing to stand up and jump out.
And what drives someone to jump out of an airplane?
Every movie I've ever seen, we've had the 82nd Airborne in it, and they're always the ones that you hear the stories about. Well, that's what I joined for. I wanted to be one of the ones that had a story to tell.
For their proud history and promising future, these soldiers appreciate what it means to be airborne.
68 years later, the U.S. Army has a mighty force of over 100,000 paratroopers, and the sky's the limit. That's especially true for one soldier whose courage defies his age. Air Force Sergeant Kevin Nichols has a story.
Roughly 3 decades ago, he was a second lieutenant on one of his first jumps. Now he's the oldest current qualified jump master in the Army.
Colonel Ronald Gallimore flashed back, watching a video of where the Airborne Corps came from during the Airborne Day celebration at Al-Fall Palace.
To be able to celebrate Airborne Birthday in combat is very hard to describe. There's not a day in Iraq that I don't get up and think about those young men and women who preceded me, who just did monumental combat experiences, and I try to make sure every day that as a leader that I give my young paratroopers everything they need to do their work.
And through 31 years of jumping out of planes, his experience is extensive.
So they had to change how they train the jump masters. The parachute works great.
Passing on knowledge to those around him.
It drops you at half the speed of a T-10.
He loves jumping so much, and he's proud to be a part of this heritage, so much so that he had to get permission from the Secretary of the Army to deploy to Iraq.
For me personally, to be able to complete my career in the Army, which is now in its 31st year, to be able to do that with the 18th Airborne Corps, the greatest military organization in the history of the world, to be able to ask the Secretary of the Army and receive the waiver to finish in combat with paratroopers just represented the icing on the cake for me.
His 31-year career came rushing back while the Airborne Chorus sang songs of yesteryear, reminding him of where he got his start as a young lieutenant.
You know, when I came in the Army, I had World War II veterans with combat stars from jumping into Normandy or Sicily or Belgium, and we held those guys in high esteem, and we listened to everything they said. And 31 years later, I almost wake up every morning and think, how can I give back? How can I pay those soldiers back for what they taught me?
Now in Iraq, it's here where the job is done, continuing his career,
paratroopers,
continuing the airborne tradition.
And that's what makes me do it.
Airborne, all the way.
Colonel Gallimore also noted that Iraq once had a paratroop force of their own. Now extinct, he feels that Iraq will once again be airborne in the future. Air Force Sergeant Kevin Nichols, Baghdad, Iraq.
That does it for this edition of our program. Check out mnf-iraq.com for all of the latest OIF information. From all of us here at AFN and Freedom Journal Iraq, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.